Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world-class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet Podcast. I am your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the pleasure to be joined by my longtime friend, Todd Woodrick. And we will talk about his journey from the Air Force to what he's doing these days, and looking forward to sharing that story. For those that may not be familiar with the MilVet is an executive platform that provides an opportunity for veterans interested in roles in the private equity, venture capital, founder space to align their skills to roles. We are executive recruiters looking to match those veterans to senior level jobs. So if you're interested in learning more about the MilVet, check out our website, www.themilvet.org. You can check out our podcast. You can check out our newsletters. You can learn about jobs we have available right now. But check us out. It's newly rebuilt, and we'd love to have you share information about what we're doing with the MilVet. But today we're here with Woody, and excited to have you on the show. Will you share with the audience what you're doing these days, man?
I sure will. And first, thanks, Beau. It's a real pleasure to be on here. I've watched your podcast many times and learned quite a bit. So being sitting in this chair, I feel honored and really appreciate the opportunity. I am currently the founder and CEO of a company called Ceptor Technologies Corporation. Company we stood up in December, laser focused on what I think is a critical time sensitive mission of putting effective sensing systems on the soldier and Marine. Right now, the U.S. soldier and Marine are facing an increasingly lethal battle space, lots of unmanned systems being fielded every day, most of which with automatic targeting and enhanced capabilities. And we have not yet accelerated our soldiers' OODA loop to the speed necessary to survive in that battle space. So we're working hard every day building systems like this that are body worn or hand deployable on the soldier or Marine, providing them computer vision assistance or situational awareness through a variety of AI-based applications that actually run right in the system itself. So it's a lot of fun. We're pushing technology hard in the areas of long-wave IR and neuromorphic imaging and some of the advanced sensor technologies. But moreover, we're building a great team who share a focus on this mission, a passion for the mission, and it's fun to be back connected to the defense mission again.
I love it, man. I'm excited to hear about more about what you're doing now. That was a great overview for it. But I know that didn't happen overnight. It is quite a journey, and I know that your journey has had a lot of zigs and zags in it. And looking forward to sharing that with the audience of how you got there. And would love to back it up to the beginning. Obviously, when we met at Command and Staff College, you had already been in the Air Force for a while. But what was the impetus for you to join the Air Force back in the day?
Wow. Okay. So full disclosure, Top Gun, I'll just be honest. Back in 1986, when I was graduating high school, Top Gun had come out. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and being a fighter pilot looked pretty cool. My dad had been in the Air Force, been in the Navy, or been assigned with the Navy while in Vietnam, and had spent some time with the Marines and the Army over there as well. And basically said, "Hey, if you want to fly, go be in the Air Force," despite Top Gun being a Navy movie. So went off to UConn, probably the only college I could have gotten into, University of Connecticut, went through ROTC with a pilot scholarship ultimately. And then the Gramm-Rudman Defense Reduction Act of 1990 hit and changed my plans. They were no longer going to bring pilots in that year into the Air Force, and I had to find something else to do. The only other thing I had any interest in doing in the Air Force was a little community called combat control, or becoming a combat control officer. Really an Army guy running around in the Air Force. So fortunately, was able to make it into combat control. Spent then the next 24 years in combat control. Towards the end of my career, I ended up moving into some other agencies like DITRA, and had an assignment there doing counter WMD technologies. That made me realize that I actually really enjoyed the technology development side of the business, as well as the operations side. And so finished out my career at the 724 Special Tactics Group as the deputy commander, but part of my portfolio was not only our own capability development within the unit for our national mission forces, but also JSOC's representative to a program called DaVinci, the Defense Venture Capital Initiative. And this is back in 2013 when that program was around. That program, the attempt to connect our probably national priority forces with their technology gaps with Silicon Valley and the venture capital community, opened my eyes into, first, not only how technology was not making it to the operators and the way we needed it to, and what needed to be done in acquisition reform, but also the opportunity I had as a guy who had been an operator but was not an engineer. I could go to the finance side of things, work on at least getting investment into the right technologies to start driving more capability back into operational side. Then an amazing senior NCO friend of mine, a guy named Scotty Fales, who was working in our capability development section, gave me the break of a lifetime. He got me connected with Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and they hired me coming out of uniform right into the lab as a guy, a knuckle dragger, no engineering credentials, no science credentials, but I could speak to where the gaps were in our capability side. So that was wonderful. I spent about 3 years at the lab working on a variety of technologies, mostly for special operations. And but the writing was on the wall that I would not be a senior engineer or scientist at the lab because I just didn't have the credentials. So I pivoted and had a wonderful opportunity to move into private equity right here in the DC area. Just a connection I had made over the years, was building out a private equity business, needed a COO. And so I guess for the second time, I rebranded myself, military guy to a program manager in the lab. And then from program management in the lab, big shift into private capital and private equity, and ultimately venture capital a little bit later.
That's an interesting journey for sure. Just from there, I know that's just the tip of the iceberg of where it's taking you from there. I will back up all the way to your Air Force time. I love my combat controllers. The first time I ever worked with them was in '01 in Afghanistan, and I will never forget. They had the coolest gear. I thought we were good cutting edge guys on the MEU, and the CCT guys were definitely one step ahead of us. The first time I ever saw a little stick drive with my CCT guys, and I was very careful.
He probably wasn't supposed to be using that, just to be honest, but
it's possible.
Your point though is well taken in that during those early years of GWAT, when the mission imperatives probably outweighed some of the standard rules and regulations. We had to get certain things done, and technology hadn't quite got there. And during that period, investing in defense was seen. This is what I learned from the DaVinci experience. I met with 10 venture capitalists when I was in uniform, and one of them, a gentleman named Lee Buchanan, who was with Paladin right here in town, pulled me aside and he said, "Let me be clear. We're not here because we're going to make any money investing in technology that you may buy, because you're frankly a terrible customer as the Defense Department." And this is he's a former naval officer, very well credentialed officer himself, but he was being very honest that the defense market was terrible, fickle purchaser, irrational, our acquisition processes. We couldn't get out of our own way. He was there because they thought they might be able to at least give us a lead where the right tech was being built to meet our needs, even though they weren't going to invest in it. So that stuck with me. And as I looked at my own opportunities later, I was able to think a little more critically about it, that, hey, it's not if you build it, they will come. You really need to understand the requirements side of things, and then the acquisition world, because you don't invest in tech, you invest in businesses, and the businesses will only be profitable at the level necessary for the investments that we were trying to make too, if they have the acquisition as well as the utility side figured out. And so that was one of the big early lessons for me. The four things you need to sell something to the government. Right? You need your technology or your solution. You need your resource sponsor, who's going to pay for it. You need your acquisition vehicle. How are they going to spend those dollars to buy what you're doing? And then you need your acquisition champion, who's going to drive that through. So that those lessons, whether you're on the private equity side or venture capital or looking to be a founder, that's a dynamic you really need to understand in the government marketplace. The last 4 years have started to see some massive changes, maybe the last 6 to 8 years, actually. It started with the consortiums and the basically reordering, actually better buying power, all the way back to Secretary Kendall, if you remember, trying to fix the defense acquisition process, make it more like commercial acquisition. Today being represented probably best by the CSOs, the commercial solution openings, those sorts of things. If you are interested in selling to defense, either as a founder or from the investment side, investing in defense, you really need to understand the evolution of acquisition and where it's gone now. And I would say we've just entered another heyday for defense technology investment, similar to what we saw back at the beginning of the GWAT, when the dollars were flowing for things like Palantir and some of the counterterrorism analytics tools. Big dollars moving to advance that's what's happening now in the hardware side as well. So it's a good time to be in that space.
Now that's some great insights, and I assume you listed the four things you have to have if you want to get and sell to the government. My assumption is a lot of people have one or two, or maybe know a little bit of each one. But is it fair to say over your journey you've done a little bit of all those? At least you're aware of how all those things work, which kind of takes time to figure out.
So I've been on the customer demand side, right? I know what I need. Please make it for us. I have been on the financing side or on the outside of making the dollars for development. But let me step back. On the government side, those four things, the place I've spent my time was really in the demand side. Who's the operational sponsor? I've been an operational sponsor for various things. The acquisition side is probably what I am thinnest in. I went through AC 101 like most of us did. As senior officers, you'd go through a certain amount of acquisition training. We all did this, I believe, at War College. But the current acquisition programs that are out there, CSOs in particular, I'm becoming more expert, but you can always learn more. So I'd say that's an area that I need to continue to grow in. I learned something from a really smart business development guy named Aloysius Donovan, former Marine, actually, who worked for Ghost Robotics as their business development lead. And he taught me about the budget, how to go into the presidential budget and trace lines all the way down from the budget through the appropriations to see where money was going for what programs. Because at the end of the day, that's that third bucket I mentioned, the funding. If you don't know where the dollars are coming from, you can have an eager purchaser. You can even have a vehicle, but the dollars that need to be appropriated through that vehicle or spent through that vehicle to buy what your company is selling, you can't just wish that it'll happen. You really need to do your homework and find out which budget appropriation do you think is going to end up funding this program or this project that you're investing in. So that part I've become tracing the dollars pretty good at, and then having your acquisition sponsor, somebody in the community. You have your acquisition officer doing the blocking and tackling, making it happen, but you need somebody above that who's making the prioritization of where they're going to spend those dollars, pushing for it as well. And that's typically not the same. That's not your user. It's another stakeholder higher up in the architecture who wants to see that capability gap solved, but it's not the actual ground level user.
Got it. That's some good insights. That's something that I have no clue about the defense acquisition process. I've been working in veterans jobs, so yeah, I need to look him up. Look him up. I want to back up to one of the things you talked about briefly in the Da Vinci process or Da Vinci opportunity or whatever the SOCOM. Does that still exist in some way, shape, or form?
It does not in that form. It was out of the RRTO, the Rapid Response Technology Office of OSD. And again, it was a well-meaning program, but each of the 10 venture capitalists I encountered there essentially shared the same view that they weren't there because they thought that we represented an unrealized market that they could invest in once they understood it, because they'd find the right technology to fill it. We are frankly too small a market for the most part. Now this was 2013. The dial's been turned up significantly now, and people are doing the big moves you're seeing these days. Usually have a defense application, but also a commercial market. So space, for instance, is a great example. All the investment going into space has dual purpose sort of applications. But even defense alone, the contract sizes are unprecedented. What's available for non-traditional performers. There have always been capital programs that have put major dollars in subs, ships, and airplanes. But we're seeing major dollars now in the smallest systems, the UASs and counter UAS systems, which means it's accessible to non-traditional performers in ways it hasn't been before. So it's a great time to enter this space. You still need those four things I talked about, but that dollars of are there dollars? The dollar part is largely being solved. Now we'll all have a big credit card bill due at some point for spending all this money as a nation, but just from the investment in defense technologies right now, the money is definitely there.
And so your first foray into the PE space. What were you what was the first thing you were building or investing in? And talk through some of the steps you've gone through to get to where you are now, to the sense you showed us earlier in the show.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So I was at APL working on largely data technologies. We were doing large data fusion for countering weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, intelligence analysis, trying to stop terrorists from getting WMD capability. So it was Hadoop and some big data management tools like that, building integrated intelligence fusion environments. Had a little bit of hardware exposure there. One of the things that happened while I was there was Oculus Rift came out. And I don't know if you remember the headset, the first real virtual reality headset that worked was Palmer Luckey's creation, Oculus.
That's the Andrew guy, right?
Yes, correct. And he's the Andrew guy because he sold Oculus to Facebook, or now Meta, for a very large amount of money. So that gave him the capital to do Andrew, right? So that came out, and I was at the lab. And while I was working in data for the most part rather than hardware, I did start thinking about how is this useful? And at the time, my thought was, what if we were to put a 360 camera on the operator, and somebody at a distant location, teammate, operations center, whoever, could see what was happening in the tactical environment through that 360 camera through their headset, basically stream the 360 feed off the operator to the viewer, remote viewer. The problem with that premise that turned out, I went and did some experimentation, and the bandwidth, you'd eat your entire local tactical data network with the amount of bandwidth it took to run that video through there. So that was problem one. This is 2013. Problem two was nobody wants the 1,000-mile screwdriver telling them how to do their mission. And the perception was this could at worst be a body camera, right, where it's used against you later. But there wasn't perceived to be a lot of utility on sharing their local situational awareness with a remote viewer. So I didn't pursue the idea at the time, but I continued to think about it. I left the lab. I went into the private equity job. I eventually left that private equity job to go into a DC-based venture capital firm, working my way closer to where my original Da Vinci sort of experience had left me focused, that I would love to be in venture investing in tech. So I ended up in venture as a COO of a firm. That's a whole nother, I'll share for the veterans, life lesson that it took me 31 days in that firm to figure out, 31 days as a COO, coming in every morning at about 4 a.m., reading the historical documents of the firm just because I felt I needed it to do my job properly. and the firm had been around a year before I had joined it. And discovered things like it had missed payroll twice in that year, and started digging into some of that stuff. So long story short, it turned out this firm, which was built around one founder CEO, was a Ponzi scheme and had been oversubscribing investments, which means they were bringing in more capital than the investment required, and not telling anyone that they brought in more investors than this individual brought in more investors than they were subscribing to the actual deal. And they were setting that excess money aside for themselves. And, ultimately, of course, that was going to catch up. So it was a Ponzi sort of approach of, we'll just keep doing more and more investments and recycling the returns from one to pay off others. Fortunately, the CFO had been hired 3 days before me. And I ended up bringing the CFO out to lunch and sort of probing a little, like, how's it going? Seeing anything odd, et cetera. And when the sweat started rolling down his forehead, I knew he had seen something wrong too. So I made the risk of confiding in him, saying, I think there's something majorly wrong at our new home here. And he literally cried at the lunch table. He said, thank God, I thought it was just me. And we shared notes, and turned out it was everything he was seeing was worse than actually I thought. The individual had misappropriated $98 million, and we went to the FBI in uniform. I had done counterterrorism targeting work, and fortunately had been sitting side by side with FBI agents in one case, and U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia in another deployment. And I called my friends and said, I'm in trouble. I'm in a firm that I think is dirty. What do I do? And they guided me through the process of how to collect the right information to show that I had no complicity in it, and connected me with FBI agents, ultimately with the SEC. And that following Friday, left a resignation letter on my desk, and they started doing their thing. The FBI and the SEC shut the place down, indicted the owner. He ultimately admitted all the wrongdoing and spent 6 years in federal correctional institution up in Maryland. So the lesson for the veterans is, first, the environment you came from, where people do the right things and you end up having disagreements over minor issues that are usually personality related. Rarely will you find your colleagues doing something massively wrong. You can't make that assumption in the civilian market. There are just as many wonderful people out there, but the guardrails that you're used to having there in place in the military around bad behavior are not there on the civilian side. It's all punishment after the fact. There's nothing guarding along the way. So be very conscious, be very, do your homework, do your diligence on anyone you're going to go work for. And even after you get there, continue to do your diligence. Fortunately, it saved me. My name was on a deck. They had gone and raised this person had gone the weekend before I took the CFO to lunch, had gone and raised $6 million from a sovereign debt fund to invest in us with my name on the pitch deck. And it had materially false information in the deck. So fortunately, our actions for the CFO and I made it clear that we were not complicit in any of it, and we were able to avoid any personal repercussions for it. But I left that job. Long answer to your short question. I left that job and I went, some of my friends from APL had started a very interesting little defense manufacturing company. One of the gaps with some of the UARCs is they do wonderful research and they can create these amazing proofs of concept, but they don't manufacture. So a lot of these technologies that are being built in the labs make it to the point of demonstration, but never are transitioned into commercial production. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is what works for a one-time demonstration in terms of design rarely is a good design for manufacturing. There's a process called DFM, or design for manufacturing, where you make stuff inherently manufacturable without sacrificing its feature set. There aren't people at the lab who have that skill set, and the people in industry in the manufacturing side expect you to hand them a completed design that's ready for manufacturing. They're not going to redesign your product for you. So that's the niche this company filled. could take really good proofs of concept, make them manufacturable, and then do low rate production. And so I spent 6 years at this company, Defense Architecture Systems, as their COO and a program manager for them. And we did wonderful work. A lot of it was in the area of counter drone or counter UAS. And many of those systems are now using automatic target detection and automatic target recognition. So I got exposed to a lot of that. We also worked on offensive systems. One of them was a robotic weapon station, basically a remote weapon that the viewer could look through their ATAC tablet, control the weapon through a crosshair, and fire it from a distance or from anywhere in the world, really. So those computer vision-based technologies on drones and on these ground weapons showed me the challenge our next generation of warfighters is facing. There's going to be so much robotic threat density in the battle space because there are going to be so many different types of these threats, and they operate so quickly, far faster than the human OODA loop can typically keep up with. The only way I see humans in the battle space being survivable in the future environment that's going to be saturated with a lot of these capabilities is if we can accelerate their OODA loop. And so that observe and orient, those first two parts of the OODA loop, and I'm starting with the counter drone space because that's where the most urgent need is. If we can give the typical dismounted soldier, Marine, special operator an extra 2 seconds heads up, if our system can detect that drone visually, thermally, neuromorphically, detect audio or RF, we have audio and RF in our systems as well. If I can give you an alert in your headset that there's a drone and give you the bearing to that, through spatial audio, we orient the alert, we can give them time to get the shotgun up at least, and give them maybe one or two more shots on the target before it's closing on them. So that's our entry point. And I guess I'll go back again as to this point of your products or investments in products, really understanding the demand signal and not what you hope it will be. I subscribe to a lean startup methodology that's been matured and published by Steve Blank. He's a Silicon Valley legend, 7-time exit, super successful entrepreneur. He and a gentleman named Pete Newell started the Hacking for Defense program you may have heard of. So Steve Blank's book, and this is going to be an infomercial. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, read this book, The Startup Owner's Manual. It sounds trite, but the methodology for customer discovery his point in there is you do not have a business as a startup. You have an idea that you're looking to validate of what you think a customer's need might be, a need so great that they're willing to invest in it before it's perfected, that they're willing to buy it, even if it's only a partial solution. And that customer has to represent a scalable enough market, another group of people with the same problem that is worth building a business around. So we're currently in the process of doing customer discovery. We've built enough of a prototype to get with customers and say, does this provide any value? If not, what would right look like? And so I'm enjoying that process very much, the customer discovery process. I'm going to shut up now and turn it back over to you because I've rambled on for a bit.
Your story is fascinating. I mean, I go back a little bit to your time with the VC firm and the due diligence. Not just that had to be a shock to the system, majorly. That I think every obstacle becomes an opportunity as well. So I'm sure there are things you can look back now and say, I got some positive out of it in the long run, but man, that's some tough lessons learned right there for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I guess I'll just reiterate that. Yeah, one of the first lessons is trust but verify, right? It's you wanna think the best of the people you're working with and for, but particularly in a smaller business, you really need to do your homework. And I'd say small business being anything under 100 people, right? Under 100 people, it's easier to hide things in a smaller business. And a founder-led business, people are afraid to ask the questions in a founder-led business. If you're afraid to ask the questions, don't go into the business. Don't join that business. If you approach it the right way, and particularly if you're going to be in any sort of a senior position in the firm, there's a polite way to ask the question, but you have to ask it, because you're assuming risk that you shouldn't be if you don't verify certain things about the legitimacy of their business processes, about their capital, like who's in the business. There are a variety of other lessons learned around family businesses and other things that people have different opinions on. But I'll just say that small business has personality complications always, right? So just have to do as much homework as you can. Do the right thing goes without saying. In my case, doing the right thing kept me out of prison, and I'll be blunt, the SEC rewards you for doing the right thing too. So there was an element of compensation that came with that when it ultimately came through, changed what I could do next, because I could then take that comp and which was probably not all that different than if I had worked in that role for 8 years successfully, but it had all been saved. In this case, it came as one check, which I could then roll into funding this business to get this business going. So, I guess just all the things you knew as a military member, doing the right things for the right reasons. There are mechanisms that reward you for that on the civilian side as well.
No, that's great to hear too. And again, I do the right thing can never go wrong, right? So that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, you're right. Keep it simple, man. Marine Corps, keep it simple. And when you left there, you went back to a group of guys that you worked with at Johns Hopkins, and now currently you've broken off and started your own firm now. Are you still working with those guys, or what's that process like?
So I split the baby, right? I left the VC firm. Spent a quality couple of weeks with the FBI and the SEC, and telling them everything I knew, and then tried to figure out, okay, first time I'm unemployed in 40 years. How do I do this? Like, what do I do? Because now I need a job. And just fortuitous that two different people connected with me. One was folks I had worked with in the first PE firm who had subsequently spun out of that and were standing up a investment management activity called a Kansas Investment Management Group. So my first engagement was actually with them, and we started building an investment firm from the ground up with the commitment that we would do it the right way. There will be no approaching the line, forget going over the line on anything, based on the experience I had just had. And SEC compliance issues are always tough to manage, but we built a Kansas with a very clear mandate that we will shut the doors before we do anything that comes anywhere close to the line. And that felt good after the experience I'd been in. Concurrent with that, I met up with my old colleagues at APL, and they were really just starting to build out this company, DAS, and they needed a COO. So with full knowledge of each other, I went and did the DAS thing full time and the Kansas thing part time. So I was growing two businesses at the same time. The Kansas one isn't so much a passion for me. It was institutional investment management, running money for endowments and foundations. And we landed an $800 million client our first year, which was amazing. So that took off well and did what we needed to do to get that business solid. And that was, it pays bills and all that. So that was great. But my passion, I found, was really in the DAS stuff. I reminded myself when I started there that I really like building stuff. The business itself, it was fun to build out DAS, build all the infrastructure of the business. And then we as a business were building things. We started with some sensor programs, counter WMD. So we built actually the world's first ruggedized mass spectrometer. First one that could run off of 5590 batteries in the back of a Humvee, running a sample while bouncing down the road, which was great, called MPCAD, a multi-phase chemical agent detector. And then we went on to do a variety of other types of work around the robotic weapons and then counter UAS stuff. So those two businesses were growing concurrently, and I had a foot in each of them, basically in the COO role of each of them. And when we got to last year, what got me to leave DAS was I had been toying with this idea, what eventually became Ceptor, for a number of years. And the only way this would work was as a product company. We really needed to dump the money into building this as a product. And DAS was not a product company. DAS was a services company that built products or helped other companies build their products, and very successful at doing that. But that's another lesson I'll tell for founders is you really need to understand the difference between those types of businesses. Services businesses and product businesses are very, very different businesses. Software businesses and hardware businesses are very, very different businesses. So don't do your homework on each type. Specifically, if you're going to go into hardware, you really need to learn about hardware products. Now, I'll caveat that most small hardware companies do some amount of services along the way to pay the bills while they're getting their product developed. And we are doing that, some of that consulting for others who are doing high-end sensor integration stuff and that sort of thing. But so I had to leave DAS to make Ceptor work, to really focus full-time on this. And to do that right, I also sold out my interest in Akanza. Just because I'm at a point in my career now, as I approach 60, I want to really focus down and do this really, really well. It's not about having multiple irons in the fire anymore. It's about figuring out the iron that matters to me the most and really hammering away on this particular iron until we get it exactly right. This one's too important. I mean, making money for colleges and universities was important, and the other manufacturing stuff, but other people could do it. This one, my co-founder, a guy named Tibor Kozek, and I have the vision for it and the passion to bring this thing to life. So I guess I would say when you find that, if you think it's a viable business and you do need to do your customer discovery to figure out, is your passion and your vision going to be a viable business? That's really exciting when you find that, because I don't have to work hard to get up in the morning. Like when I wake up, my head's already going a million miles an hour on what are we doing on this thing next? And so I stay in touch with both old businesses and would happily do business with them. Like there may be a day where I need my stuff manufactured and go back with that. So that's another thing is people in the special operations community sometimes have a tendency to burn bridges behind them. They're very passionate people, right? And the businesses you get involved in in your second phase of life, everyone treats them like the mission, that they're no fail. This business and this relationship has to succeed. And if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, there's a lot of hurt feelings and there's a lot of burnt bridges when people move from one job to the other. Don't do that. Don't do that. Figure a way to gracefully maintain alignment with these people while still changing your role. And because it's not necessary usually for you to, most people get it when you tell them, hey, I have enjoyed taking this to here. Where I need to go feels like a little something different. And then make sure on your way out, you're doing things to help that business. And even if they're bitter, the world becomes way too small in the military veteran community when you start excluding people from your world because you've chosen to burn that relationship down.
I love hearing your journey has been awesome, and the lessons learned you've shared, I think, have been spot on in so many ways. The good, the bad, the ugly of it, and I think a lot of it is, it's every journey is different, and yours certainly. And I love that you're at a point now where you're so passionate about what you're doing now. I've seen that with other folks I've interviewed. It's like when you do find that one thing, like I want to be 100% all in. I'm putting all the chips. I'm betting on me. I believe in me. I have the experience now, and I'm going all in. And I love to see that passion from you. And obviously, it makes it nice to wake up every day and know you have something you really truly believe in, which is great. Love that. As we wrap up, we're kind of at time now, but Any final pearls of wisdom for folks that want to get into the space, whether it's things to read, things to do, just things from your experience. If you want to get into the more broad, PE, PC, but founder type space, like what are some last closing words of wisdom as we wrap up?
I'll give you one generic piece of advice coming out of uniform that do not take time off. Because the minute you take time off, when I mean truly taking time off, which is you say, I'm going fishing for 6 months or I'm going golfing for 6 months. 5 months from now, you are now an unemployed person trying to re-enter the workplace, not as a former O6 or even general officer or whatever. You're now an unemployed person, and it's a really hard place to go from, and you will not be used to that because in the military you never had to shop for your next job. So make your transition and then take some time off. When you make your transition, go for one of three things for that first job. The first job is unlikely to be your dream. I'll just say it. Your first job is, the purpose of it is to transition and start to understand the civilian world a little bit, start to understand your own new identities, come to peace with it a little bit. Probably not best to do that in the place that matters the most to you. So I always encourage guys and gals, three things. You need a name. Go to a company that the name means something. Your McKinsey or your Goldman, your PwC, wherever it is, your Amazon, right? And so that name, it's either going to be the company you're working for, the title. If you go for a title in a reputable organization, you can trade on that. The one risk of that, I'll tell you, is once you are in a C-suite role, you will not be considered in the next job for another role that actually may be a better role for you if you've been in that C-suite, because it'll be viewed as a demotion that you will not be motivated to that program management role or whatever else the next thing is. So be careful about the seduction of a title. And then there's salary, right? DC area is a wonderful place to transition because the salary rates are 20% higher than the rest of the country, with maybe New York being an exception. But that salary is a key part of negotiating your next job. And if you come out in Jacksonville, North Carolina versus DC, and then you try to get a job in DC, everybody will figure out what your former salary was when you're negotiating your next one. So take the company name, the title, or the salary. Those are altitude and airspeed that you can trade later to maneuver to where you want to go. But that should be your focus on your first transition job out, not on nailing this is the perfect place for me, because it's unlikely it will be. When you do decide, I also don't recommend jumping right into a startup. There are too many things you don't yet know about the business world. Doesn't matter what you did in the military, you were not running a P&L. You weren't running a profit and loss statement for a business. And until you've been around in a private business long enough to start to really understand the actual dynamics of what drives some of those things, you're not going to be a great asset to your startup. So I would always hold off on the startup job until a little bit later. And then if you're going to go into the finance side as a non-finance person, the ops is where you need to be. And what I mean by that is at the senior level of ops, maybe not like a managing director for operations, that sort of a role. You're unlikely to go into a COO role unless it's a small firm, and then you'll have the dynamic I caution against. I've lived that dynamic. That's why I'm telling you this. You're then shooting only for COO jobs from that point forward, and it narrows the scope of what's out there for you. So, those are a couple things. And read Steve's book. He's got a couple of these: the Lean Startup, the Startup Owner's Manual. This one in particular, the Startup Owner's Manual. And Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Those are the two books I'd recommend.
Dude, some great advice. I really appreciate it. Again, I think your journey is one that so many folks can learn from. You've had some interesting, opportunities to excel based on the places you've been and the things you've seen. And I can't wait to see when we engage in 3 years. Where this company is, and hopefully you're just crushing it and happy and growing it. So, thanks for the time today, Woody. I appreciate it. best of luck.
No, it's been absolutely my pleasure. The chance to talk to your audience is really an honor. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram @TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@TheMilVet.org. Thank you so much and take care.